My people, one day monkey go market, no go come back. That is the case of the INEC Chairman Yakubu Mahmood. He has now been turned into a use and dump. Tinubu don't use him, Buhari don't use him. Now they are dumping him. No matter the kind of position you might have attained in life, don't think that the position is forever, because one day, you surely leave that position, which is the case for Yakubu Mahmood. You guys, Yakubu Mahmood, the EFCC chairman, worked for Buhari. He worked for Tinubu. A lot of people would say that he's very instrumental to the emergence of Tinubu as the president, because there were a lot of things that happened during the 2023 general elections that are quite questionable. A lot of things happened that most people would believe that it was the handwork of a ruling party and the attempt to retain power. Because how do you attempt the technical glitches that happened during the 2023 election, despite the fact that INEC assured us that the results will be transmitted electronically? You guys, we all know what would happen if the election results were to have been transmitted electronically. Maybe the president we have today would not be the president, because it would be the reflection of a will of a people. That is why Nigerians, up until date, we are still using the analog method. We don't want to go to the next level, despite the amount of money that the federal government keeps spending on our elections yearly, or at 4 years interval. Despite that huge amount of money, Nigerians still decide to do it the analog way, the manual way, putting results on sheets, just so that they can mutilate results, just so that they can retain power. In January 2025, INEC had complained that 40 billion naira is not enough to conduct just off-cycle election. This is not the main election. Off-cycle election, INEC had complained that 40 billion naira is not enough for them. You can imagine the huge amount of money that has been wasted to elections in this country, all because we prefer the analog way, the analog method. And a lot of money has been gulped by INEC over the years just for election. But to what end? Can we still say that we have free and fair election at this point? Has INEC ever even conducted free and fair elections? Those are the questions that are on the minds of a lot of people. If we go down the lane and check how much INEC has gulped all through the years, you will be amazed. Just in 2025, INEC was proposing 126 billion naira instead of a 40 billion naira they got. 126 billion naira. That is what INEC was asking for at the beginning of the year, to run the runoff elections. You guys, Yakubu Mahmood has been used, and now he has been dumped, because know how. Like I said at the beginning of the video, you will leave that position, which is what is happening to Yakubu Mahmood. Last night, Wednesday night, late last night, Bola Tinubu directed that Mahmood Yakubu should leave the position with immediate effect, with immediate alacrity. Even according to reports, even the scheduled meeting that you ought to have with stakeholders and political party members, he could not have it. He's not going to be able to have those meetings, because he has been given a directive to vacate the position with immediate effect. I've made a video concerning the possible names that are being considered for Mahmood Yakubu's position. Please check that video out. It's up on my channel. You guys, let's take a look at the details. There was confusion on Wednesday night following reports that President Bola Tinubu has allegedly directed the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, to proceed on terminal leave ahead of the expiration of his tenure. Yakubu is expected to end his two-term tenure of 10 years in the first week of December 2025. Yakubu was first appointed as INEC chair in 2015 by President Muhammadu Buhari. He was reappointed by President Buhari after his first tenure lapsed and confirmed by the Senate in December. No INEC chairman has served two terms since the establishment of a commission. The report alleged that Yakubu was asked to suspend official duties and proceed on leave, a development that has thrown the commission's schedule into uncertainty. The reported directive led to the abrupt cancellation of a chairman's final quarterly consultative meeting with political parties and a planned session with civil society organizations. Though the guiding can confirm that the quarterly consultative meeting of the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC), which was scheduled to begin on Wednesday with an interactive session with political parties, was abruptly postponed. It remains unclear whether the development is connected to alleged presidential directive. But responding to the report, the chief press secretary to the INEC chairman, Mr. Rotimi Oyekomi, urged Nigerians to first consult the 1999 Constitution before drawing conclusions. The first thing you need to do is find out what the law says about the appointment and removal of INEC chairman and national commissioners, he said. The 1999 Constitution clearly outlines the process in Section 154, subsection 1, which states, except in the case of ex-official members or where other provisions are made in this Constitution, the appointment of a person to the office of a chairman or member of any of the bodies so established shall be made by the President and shall be subject to confirmation by the Senate. It also provides safeguards against arbitrary removal in Section 157, subsection 1. A person holding any of the offices to which this section applies may only be removed by the President acting on an address supported by a two-thirds majority of the Senate, praying that he be so removed for inability to discharge the functions of office, whether arising from infirmity of body or any other cause, or for misconduct. You all, let's have your total new opinions in the comment section, guys. In this case, INEC chairman is not being removed because he has any infirmity or any health issues. He's being removed, to go on his leave, on his final leave, because before you can go, leading to the time that you have to retire from government position, you have 3 months. You have 3 months to be on leave in order to process whatever you want to process before the final date comes. And in this case, INEC chairman is supposed to, vacate his duties finally the first week of December. But because it's 3 months to that time, he has to go on leave, which is what the president has now instructed him to do. Before we proceed to another discussion, let's take a look at some of the reactions we got online. The first comment I have is from Ikenga. It says, this is the worst INEC chairman Nigeria has ever had. Whatever that came from Buhari has proved to be a cost to him and his region, not only Nigeria. Nature was never kind to this country by allowing the man to destroy the nation for 8 years, only to catch up with him a little while after the office. Peter Jimo says, victory is a product of aggressive war. Not all victories is a product of war. There are constitutional victories that are devoid of war, especially in very decent societies that rule of law is observed, not dramatized. Moving on to related news, according to sources and according to reports, the EFCC chairman, Olaolu Kayode, and the sole administrator of Rivers State, Ibokete Ibaz, was spotted at the State House in Abuja yesterday evening around 5:30 p.m. The purpose of this meeting is not yet known, but a lot of people have already started speculating that maybe EFCC wants to start an investigation, into the activities of Ibokete Ibaz during his administration, his very short 6 months administration in Rivers State. We all know that the members of the State House of Assembly had also resolved to probe Ibaz's 6 months administration. So probably that might have to do with the reason why they were at the State House, Abuja, yesterday evening, 5:50 p.m. Let's have your total new opinions in the comments section below.
Nigeria's election. So there is a possibility, and in fact, INEC is at the brink of a historic leadership transition. In less than 60 days, the tenure of Professor Mahmood Yakubu, the first INEC chairman to serve 2 full terms, will come to an end. What does this mean? His exit just 15 months before the 2027 general election sets the stage for what will become an unprecedented change within the commission, with several commissioners also due to retire between 2006 and 2007. There are growing concerns that the country could approach its next elections under an almost entirely new leadership team. What does this mean for us? Now, a lot has happened under Mahmood Yakubu, for good and for bad. That's perspective from some Nigerians who believe that there are a lot of things, a lot of gaps under his watch. Now, in terms of the agitation from the minds of Nigerians on who should be the leader of INEC, or who should lead INEC, and those who are the management of INEC, who are they, where are they from, the issues of bias, issue of their background and competence. A lot of things come into the frame. But let's get the conversation started. Those who are now anticipating and mapping out what should be the norm. Samson Itodo is an election observer and election development expert, and the executive director of Yaga Africa is live for us here in our studio to give insight. Thanks so much, Samson, for joining us.
Thanks, always a delight to be here. Good evening.
How significant would this transition be, not only for INEC as an institution, but for our elections?
I think, Joe, you've said it all. It's very significant. Significant because you're going to have a relatively new electoral commission that will manage the 2027 elections. And you recall a few weeks ago, Yaga Africa released our status of electoral integrity report for 2025. And one of the projections that we made was that the 2027 election could most likely be the most compromised and perhaps the most expensive. And one of the reasons that we advanced was because of this leadership transition in INEC. If it's not managed carefully, if it's not managed from a statesman point of view, you could probably have, the next elections jeopardized because citizens are not going to trust, who mans the INEC. So it's very significant because Professor Mahmood has been there for 10 years. That's a decade. And his exit, leaves a lot of vacuum because you ask yourself, if a new chairman is appointed, whenever he is there sufficient time for the chairman to settle? If you look at what data says, and I'm sure we're going to go through the slides, you see the commissioners who are leaving next year, and then those who are leaving on the eve of the 2027 election. So to a large extent, it's quite significant. Don't forget that the level of trust of citizens in the electoral process is also at its lowest ebb. So this is really an opportunity, for the president, for the Senate and the National Assembly to rebuild public trust and confidence in the electoral process.
We forget things quickly in this country. Like him or hate him, Mahmood Yakubu will be known as the man who entrenched beavers. Will be known as the man who introduced the election result viewing portal. Will also be the man who finalized on the delineation to an extent of polling unit. And at the time, it was about 1,500 per voter in a polling unit, and there are a lot of the polling units that were due for expansion. That happened under him. But there are a lot of issues also. This man, a decade, significant, and he has seen how many presidents now and how many elections. About three transitions that have happened under him.
No, actually one. Just because 2015 wasn't the one.
One major. But there are 3 elections conducted under him. Now, interesting. There's none.
2 general elections. That's 2019 and
2023.
Because 2015 was Professor Jega. He came right after 2015.
Yeah. So, if you were to review Professor Mahmood Yakubu, how would you review his time as INEC leader?
I think that I really highlighted some of those reforms, that when you look at this 10 years, there has been remarkable reforms that were introduced in the electoral process. And to also add to that, that it was under this 10 years that for the first time in our history, that ballot papers and result sheets were produced locally. And that happened in the 2023 elections. Because previously, we've always printed our ballot papers and result sheets outside the country. But this time around, we printed them locally. And that's something we should encourage. Other countries, countries like South Africa, for instance, 100%, they print their materials. In fact, they fund their elections 100% without taking monies from anybody. But when you look at all these reforms that were introduced, the fundamental question to ask is, when you look at public trust in the electoral process, it has actually dampened because of, one, issues around electoral fraud. You also see the sabotage by other institutions within the election governance architecture. But the fact that we are actually at a point where citizens' trust in the electoral process, it's very, very low, gives really source of concern. But there are some reforms that he introduced that needs to be retained, like the technologies that you mentioned. Unfortunately, these same technologies that were introduced as game changers are the same tools that have been now used to subvert the process. And I think that as we think about retaining these tools, the next INEC would have to be an INEC that subjects things like the BVAS, like the IREV, to independent audits. Let's look at the back end, because what politicians have done, coupled with complicit INEC officials, is to leverage these same technologies to undermine the integrity of the process.
We'll go through the slides. Stand by, everyone, for that. But you know why I was laughing? We print ballot paper in some other African countries. And I remember Americans were saying that Russia was influencing its own election. And I remember that on the day of Nigeria's election in 2011, I was just arriving back into the country. And at about noon, President Jega at the time announced a postponement of the election due to logistics problems. Guess what? We thought that was the end of logistic problem. In 2015, similar thing happened. 2019, it happened. INEC is a major logistic disaster. But in 2023, we saw an improvement. And in fact, at the time, it was an ex-military man who was in charge of logistics at INEC. But there are a few changes that have happened. We've made progress significantly,
we do.
No doubt. Whether or not there are bad elements in INEC that has given Professor Mahmood Yakubu a bad man, whether or not one man can sit in Abuja and control whatever happened, and those who argue that why did you announce the election result in the middle of the night? Why didn't you? There are a lot of issues. No, and what are the glitches? There were a lot of debates.
There were also missed opportunities.
Of course.
Several missed opportunities.
To awaken some kind of trust.
Exactly. And we hope that the next INEC would learn, from this particular INEC. But I think at the heart of it is we need to now rebuild public trust and confidence in the electoral process. That's why the appointment of the next INEC chairman and the national commissioners is very, very critical, because today you have partisan people who are currently in INEC, and that is
even with the agitation from Nigerian people. Although not only in this government that we have seen that under Jonathan, you remember, 3 people were dropped. And but the agitation against some of the elements who were nominated. Nobody cared.
I think it really went bad. And one of the bad legacies that President Buhari left on our electoral process is how he appointed, individuals, who have clear partisan interest. And President Tinubu, when he had the opportunity, he didn't, reverse that particular practice, because some of the recs that he nominated, you saw the huge public outcry. There are people who are known to have been campaign actors, people who have, whether they are biological affinities or cronies of certain politically exposed persons and appointed into the Electoral Commission. These are some of the issues, because when you do that, you reduce the confidence that people have in the electoral process. And that's why the appointing authority, in this case, who is the president, there are certain criteria that he needs to look out for before he appoints the next chair or the next set of national commissioners.
Legally speaking, there are constitutional provisions as to how the processes of appointing and the Constitution gives an almost overriding and largely unchecked powers to the president to nominate, to get advisory from the Council of State. Not
just advice.
It does, So usually what happens at the Council of State meeting is sometimes I'd imagine that when they say, no, we don't want this man, the president will say, I've heard you, and still went ahead to pass it into the Senate or the House of Reps. Because they are in advisory, and it goes to the Senate, and they appoint, which has the constitutional power to screen and also pass the nomination. Then the person stands appointed. But that has been questioned. A lot of Nigerians, like your organization and your colleagues in the civil society climate, saying, look, we need to subject the appointment of INEC leaders to a non-partisan, well, if you may, and a more objective process. Such that, but I don't know how that's going to happen. I hope that that's going to be part of our electoral law reforms or in the Constitution, because this is a constitutional matter. It's not about the Electoral Act now. But if you look at some of the slides that your organization have put forward, what appointments will make or break the electoral integrity in 2027, that is the meat of it. So if we may go forward, it gives us an understanding of why it is important that we take note of these appointments.
So, for instance, when you look at, as at today, we are 514 days to the 2027 elections. So that's 1 year and 4 months. So we don't actually have time. So 114 days to the 2027 elections. So when you think about what are the criteria, like you mentioned, the Constitution sets 2 conditions. The first one is the person must be non-partisan, and 2, the person must have unquestionable integrity. It is clear from experience that these 2 qualifications or criteria are inadequate. There's a great need that the next INEC chairman or national commissioners should, one, be individuals that not only have impeccable character, but they are individuals that do what, Shehu, that have what? That do not have any partisan connection whatsoever. And what we are saying is, in fact, that person should not have been a member of a political party, whether present or past. That is one. The second is that the next INEC chairman and commissioners at least should be people who have courage, who have the ability to resist political pressure. Because leading in INEC requires people who are courageous to call the bluff, of politicians when they try to put pressure on INEC. But then also, we've also seen how incompetence impacted on the 2023 elections. When you flood INEC with people who don't have, the competence or understand elections, what you get is what happened in a place like Sokoto. If you recall, there is the REC in Sokoto was actually relieved of his responsibility because of sheer incompetence. When you compare the Edo and the Ondo governorship elections, you clearly see a stark difference in the way that the commissioners manage that election. So competence does play a critical role in determining who becomes the next INEC chairman. But then, what we have said is the president has the power. It's his prerogative. But we're saying the president needs to rise above politics and act as a statesman. And one of the things that the president can really do is when he decides on whoever he wants to appoint, can he release and publish the name and ask citizens or professional groups of civil society, to submit memoranda and then submit petitions, perform a pre-nomination sort of screening. That way you integrate public participation. And once you receive those memos from citizens, you evaluate them on their merit. Because what we see is the president goes ahead, he nominates, and sometimes these people are either people who have some baggage or the other. I think the second dimension is the role that the Senate plays. And in this particular case, the Senate needs to introduce the framework for citizens' oversight. What happens is, once the name of nominees are read on the floor, that is it. The Senate does not call for memos, it does not call for petition. However, in previous appointment process, we've seen how civil society have been very proactive. But one of the things the Senate can do this time, because of the criticality of this appointment, is once a nomination has been made, they need to enhance the credibility, the transparency, and the quality of the nomination process. When you receive petitions from civil society, from professional groups, attend to those petitions, consider them on their merit, and then when you make a decision, please communicate it to the people. I think that those screenings should be televised. You should invite people to come make oral submissions, and then make that entire process open. This is what civil society and citizens are saying if we want to make this entire process participatory.
Give me a moment. There's so much more on how we can have, if you call it, a credible pathway to a credible, fair election in 2027. We're just working on the brink of a transition. What happens to a nation that you already have biased and partisan people conducting your elections? That's danger, isn't it? We'll be right back after this break, everyone, to continue. Thanks so much, everyone, for staying with us on the program. Our concluding moment now on the conversation of INEC leadership, what it means, and perhaps for our nation and the credibility of our election. If you are able to elect properly, then you are guaranteed that the people you really want are in office, and you can hold them accountable for proper governance. But when you are not given the opportunity to elect in a credible manner, you know that our nation is doomed. That's why we need to talk about this, because it's important. If you look at the screen right now, it gives you an understanding of those who, what I raised earlier in respect of the need and the importance of the fact that the kind of INEC we'll be having in 2027 are people who will be just about a year or few months into office. If you look at it, perhaps the most senior person here, or the most experienced on the board, is Sam Olumekum. Sam Olumekum has spent more years, I guess, than anyone, because he was a rec. Yeah. You remember?
Yes, he was a rec.
I think in Ondo and Lagos.
In Lagos.
Then it now was appointed as national commissioner.
But you have May Agbamuche. This is our second term. Yeah, Mohammed Haruna. This is also his second term. Yeah. So they are also very experienced as well. When you look at Ken was a former director at INEC. Yes. So he has been, in the commission. But Shen, one of the interesting things...
Well, I could even say that he's probably the most experienced, because he was a career INEC man.
Yeah. But when you look at the rest, they are also qualified for reappointment. So, for instance, next year, once the chairman leaves in a couple of weeks, there are 4 national commissioners that will leave sometime in Q3 of next year. So there will be 4 new national commissioners that will be appointed, or if these ones are reappointed. But the interesting thing is that the other 5 here, their tenure would expire just 2 days
before the election.
Yeah, because the next election will be on the 20th, and then 20th of February 2027. Yeah. Again, thanks to Professor Mahmood, because he regularized the timetable, so we can tell when the next election will hold. But 2 days, so we will be in the midst of collation of results when the tenure of these 5 other national commissioners, would expire.
So apart from Malam Haruna and Agbamuche, Mr. Agbamuche Umbu, and Sam is you. Apart from the 2 of them, the 3, Professor Gumus, Ken Ukeagu, and Sam Olumekum, they could be reappointed.
They could be reappointed.
So are the other 5,
all the other 5,
whose appointments will expire next year.
Absolutely.
So,
but we also lost one of the national commissioners.
General
so there's currently a vacancy. In INEC in this regard. So if you clearly see, and there are several scenarios, this is why it is important, for the president, for the Senate, to take this appointment seriously, because it has grave implications, for our elections. And in weak democracies, where politics is a do or die affair, often political elites see leadership transition in the Electoral Commission as an opportunity to capture the Electoral Commission or consolidate control over the political process. Yeah. This is why we're calling on the President and the Senate that this is an opportunity, a golden opportunity that have been presented to them. if you're going to consider appointments, ensure that these are individuals that have not been members of political parties, whether present or past. They must be people who have impeccable character, but also people who are courageous. And you know, like some would say, also people who have mental alertness. Because INEC job is a tedious one. You need people who are healthy, who are strong to deliver credible elections.
You all, let's have your thoughts and your opinions in the comment section. Thank you very much for always listening and watching, guys. I'll see you all in my next video. Bye for now.